thank you all for joining. Thank you all the Torah. Anytime subscribers and listeners that are listening wherever you are. Tonight we are learning Leilu Nishmat Rabbi Avram ben Chaim Yehuda and Rabbi Cheskel ben Rabbi Avram. So tonight we're continuing along the topics that we've been discussing throughout the past, really current events of the past, almost 5 weeks already. No, maybe more. 40, 45, 46. Yeah. So, and the idea really is how to deal with it. Now, it's not just the lessons that I tried to bring out is not just lessons that you can learn related to the war, related to current events. These are lessons for day-to-day lives, and it's especially true with tonight. This is something that's very important. It's actually a very important lesson for life that I strongly recommend everybody not just put it into the current events, but rather any aspect of your life. You can really plug it in. So the way that I would like to present this is to go through a bunch of different varying emotions, because that is really what we are going through in these days. We go through these different emotions and a roller coaster of emotions, if you may, throughout our day-to-day life. But when things are on edge, when things are on a heightened sensitivity, it's all the more so. And we could be switching anywhere from anger to sadness, from frustration to anxiousness, from fear to dread, and anywhere in between. Now, like when you look at the news, the same article or the same piece of news, reading it from different point of views, can bring you different emotions that come out. You could look at an article that speaks about the death of, the IDF death toll, which obviously will bring you sadness. And then you look at another article which speaks about the attack on Israel, and that will give you like this anger. And then you look at something in response to that where people say, oh, well, Israel is responding too strong. A very common claim that's going around now is that Israel's response is too strong, not proportional to the attack that happened on October 7th. And the reason why they look at that is they look at the dead numbers in Gaza and the dead numbers in Israel. You look at 1,400 in Israel, not including the soldiers that are currently since the war started. And then you look at the numbers in Gaza, which is 11,000 at this point. Again, a number that's presented to us by Hamas, by the Gaza Health Ministry, which is literally Hamas, and it's a number that you can't really trust, or you can't trust at all. And the reason why people are saying that it is the response is too strong is just very simple. You look at the numbers. But what people don't get to realize is that Israel is not just responding to past threats, they're responding to future threats. Hamas said again and again, very clearly, that October the 7th is just the beginning. They keep on going to do it again and again and again. So this is not a response to something that happened and then just, like we're moving forward. This is a response to something that is going to continue to happen unless it's completely dismantled, unless Hamas is completely nullified from any position of power whatsoever. So you have anger, and then you have sadness, and then you look at all the anti-Semitism that's going on in the world, and many people are becoming fearful. You look at from the college campuses to the intellectual elites and what they're presenting the information and who they are siding with. And then you look at large countries and who they are siding with, and people are getting very fearful. People that are living in certain countries, they realize what's going on with these countries that are moving away from Israel. Israel literally suffered a terror attack and was responding in the most humane way possible. And then you have countries that are backing out of their relationship with Israel, and that's fearful for the people living in the country. Like, what are you doing? Like, you're siding with the terrorists? There is literally, I don't know, a time in history where people would side with terrorism. Like, anybody that have of a sound peace of mind, anybody that is somewhat of a level of intellect, would never side with murder, would never side with the barbarism that's going on over here. And yet we see over here the college elite, the countries are siding with them, and this is making people very fearful. So at one point we're sad, another point we're angry, and then we're fearful. And then, when you throw into the wrench where people are screaming at ceasefire, then you have anger, you have frustration, you have confusion, because we all know that ceasefire is not going to help anything. Anybody that's saying ceasefire is just showing that they have no idea what they're talking about. It's as simple as that. Because if you say ceasefire is just going to cause more deaths in the future. If you know anything about the geopolitical situation in Israel, about the Hamas relationship with Israel, about the Palestinian Authority relationship with Israel, a ceasefire will only mean one thing, and that is more death in the future. You'll postpone it now. It's like a little kid who has a monster in their closet, and what's their method of protection is, let me go under the cover, because that's what's going to protect me. So let me take, as an ostrich would, and dig my head into the sand, and that's what's going to protect me. The people that are screaming ceasefire, that's what they're doing. They're covering themselves with a blanket because they said, oh no, it's too angry right now. It's too much bloodshed right now. All they're doing is they're going to be you just a simple understanding of what's going on. You'll realize that this will happen again and again and again, and then there's only going to be more bloodshed. Meaning that if this happens again, just to understand what's going on, that if this chas v'shalom happens again, God forbid happens again, that means that Israel is going to have to retaliate even greater. So now let's say there's tens of thousands of deaths, which again, hard to say because who knows what the real numbers are. You could add another zero to that of what's going to be the next time around, because it's just going to get more drastic. So it has to be dealt with right away. It's like someone who has a cancer, chas v'shalom, God forbid, someone's going through chemotherapy. They if they're like so close to eradicating the cancer, they're not going to say, okay, you know what, the patient's having a very difficult time right now, let's hold it off. Obviously, if the patient is on the verge of death, they're going to hold it off. But if the patient has any strength anymore, they're going to plow through it to remove the cancer once and for all. And that's what's going on over here. So when someone goes and starts saying ceasefire, you're like, wait a minute. So then you're bringing a whole other range of emotions that you can't even begin to comprehend, because it's such a mixed range of emotions. Then you look at what the President of the United States, President Biden, what President Biden is trying to do is trying to make both sides happy. So he is supporting Israel in public and then criticizing Israel in public. He's supporting Israel behind, and then he's also criticizing it. Like, when you look at it, it's like almost that he's trying to say things that one side wants to hear. And then he goes and he's trying to appease the other side. And now, before I go any further, we're very thankful and grateful for all the help and the support that the United States government and President Biden has given to Israel. But when you try to satisfy both sides of a fight, of a difficult situation, you end up satisfying none. And so that's why people from both sides are like confused, happy, like they're not sure what to feel in this situation. And then, to add another range of emotion, is when Israel goes and states some sort of fact, whatever the fact is, amount of dead, whatever it is. You know what many of the media say? Okay, but how can we trust you? When Hamas says something, they're like, okay, well, Hamas said this. And you have many times, in fact, almost every single time, Hamas has been caught in a lie. Like, how many times can the boy who cried wolf cry wolf till the world realizes that this guy is a pathological liar? Like, you can't trust anything that they're saying. But yet they keep on saying, to the point is that Israel proves their information, and they keep on asking, oh, prove it to us more. And on the flip side, Hamas is keep on being proved wrong, and they're taking that information and they're bringing it to the Israelis and be like, well, Hamas said this. Hamas could say anything. It came to a point that they have a chazaka, right? They came to the point that we all know where Hamas stands. Hamas is not a truthful negotiator. Hamas is not someone that you're able to negotiate with. You can't negotiate with barbarism. You can't negotiate with the intellectual levels that they're dealing with, the anger and the frustration or whatever it is that they're coming from. There is no negotiating with that. There's nothing that can be discussed with that. And yet the frustration goes so high when Israel presents their facts, and then Hamas presents their information, because it's not facts, and then the media, which is supposed to present unbiased information, they're like, oh, well, you're saying this? Well, I have a pathological liar that's been telling me different. Yeah, he said he doesn't agree with you. Be like, are you like, listen to the words that are coming out of your mouth? Like, how does that make any sense whatsoever? So this brings extreme amount of frustration. Now, when you have all these level of emotions, when you have these, it affects everything that you do. It affects your day. It affects your relationships with your spouse, with your children, with your work. It affects your productivity. It affects the way that you are, your spiritual growth. It affects so many things. So that is why it's so important to understand how to deal with these emotions. How are we supposed to go and be able to take the information, have that emotion, and then present it in a positive and a beneficial way. And then when you take all that and you throw the hostages situation into the mix, it like throws everybody off. So right now, excuse me. The hostage situation is set to start on Friday. It was supposed to start on Thursday. It's been pushed off. But just a brief information of what, again, this will very likely change by the time it actually comes into fruition. But right now, there is supposed to be a 4-day truce. It's not a ceasefire. It's a truce that the Israeli government is going to be able to take about 50 hostages. These are women and children under the age of 19. And in return, there is going to be 150 Palestinian women and teenagers that are in the Israeli prison. They're going to be freed. And this is over a 4-day period. So you're talking about 12 or so hostages per day, and multiply that by 3 for the Palestinian side. This pause in the war can be extended for a day at a time, and that will be an increase of 10 hostages per day that Israel is going to refrain from attacking. So one of the reasons for that is that Hamas does not have all the hostages. Hamas, as much as Hamas is in the news, there's other people at play over here. There is the Islamic Jihad that has a lot of hostages. There's also citizens, what they say is citizens that have hostages also. So the ceasefire or the temporary cease that's going on right now is tend to have Hamas go and find all the other hostages so they can extend this if it does come to that. Another thing that they threw into the mix is that Israel has to stop its air traffic in the north from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. and stop all air traffic in the south for the entire period. And this is where it's going now. This is going to be facilitated by the Red Cross through Egypt, and how they're going to move the hostages with Israeli soldiers. And this is the gist of the hostage situation as we know it right now. Now, there is a lot of confused feelings regarding this. And even in Israel, there was a poll that done, like how do the Israelis feel about this? So 52% of the Israelis said that they are in favor of the deal. They want the hostage release, and they're willing to give that 150 terrorists free them from the prison. There are 32% of Israelis oppose it, and 16% they don't have a clear opinion on the matter. So when we look at it, and we're taking in this information, like at one side, of course, we want the hostages back. But at this other side, they're freeing a triple amount of terrorists. And it's not like a tit-for-tat situation. They are giving us innocent civilians, and we are giving them convicted felons. It's not a fair trade, not in quantity nor quality. So at the end of the day, we are saving 50 lives, but the question that comes up, but at what cost? And the reason why this question is coming up, because the last time they did a hostage swap is for Gilad Shalit, the soldier, where they freed 1,027 terrorists. One of them was Yehia Sinwar. He was the mastermind behind this October 7th massacre, who's still in hiding like a cockroach in the Gaza tunnel somewhere. So you think about it, okay, so we saved, in hindsight, we saved one, but at the same point in time, we killed who knows how many because of that. Again, I'm not going to get into the halachic matters, of the situation, because it is very interesting, but rather we do look at what is going on right now. So technically there is a say that this should be done, but there's a lot to speak about from a halachic perspective on the hostage negotiations and how much we should or should not be flexible in. But in any case, this is, it looks like it's happening. So now, how are people feeling about it? People are happy. People are confused. People are frustrated. People are angry. People are like, wait, that's not fair. Like, there's so many emotions that are just, overflowing in each and every single person. And to take that matter and put it on top of the international community, where the international community is throwing words of genocide and human rights violation, but they're throwing it at the wrong side. It was. I can't say I was shocked, because at this point I don't know how much is it. Like, I'm not shocked anymore. That's very unfortunate, but. There is a magazine called The Nation. The Nation is a very left-wing magazine. The peaceful march on Israel that was done, on Tuesday, not this Tuesday, previous, they call it a hate rally. They call it a celebration of war crimes. This was by far the largest and the most peaceful march of the entire of any rally, any march since the beginning of this war, and they call it a hate rally. And this is how the world is looking at it. So then you're up to frustration again, and then like when you look at it to make matters upon to add emotion upon emotion, you look at what's going on in the Shifa hospital. So. It's at this point, it's proven already without a doubt, that Hamas used the hospital for a base of terror, for their base of operations, and many, if not every, organization that was in Gaza, non-for-profit, human rights organization, knew about this. They knew about the human rights violation. That's including the United Nations. That's including Doctors Without Borders. That's including the Red Cross. That's including all the journalists. They all knew, and this is a outright violation of the 1949 Geneva Convention, where you're not allowed to use a hospital for a military activity. And there was an addition to that protocol, and that is that under no circumstances can a medical unit be used in an attempt to shield military objectives from attack, which is also what they have been doing. This is a direct human rights violation, very obviously stated, and you have all of the human rights activists that were in Gaza. They knew about this, and this is not something that just came about now and everybody found out about it. This is back in 2007 when Hamas came into power. There was a doctor that came out in Shifa Hospital and said the medical staff is suffering from fear and terror. Why? Because in 2007, we saw in every corner of the hospital a Hamas fighter. That was in 2007. In 2007, Human Rights Watch reported that Hamas not only is in the hospital, but they hold executions in the hospital. This is a hospital, Bet Hanun, not in the Shifa hospital. Like in 2008, New York Times reported Hamas murdered 6 suspects within a period of 24 hours. They even say that in the X-ray department, they use that in the hospital, they use that as a prison and interrogation room. That this is written by the Amnesty International in 2015, that they interrogated and tortured people in the hospital. So, very, very common knowledge. Yet, what happens? What do you see when Israel is going and saying, "Oh, Hamas is using the hospital for military activity"? Everyone's like, "Can you prove it? Can you, is it? Well, you found one tunnel, that's what you found." And the more they keep on finding more and more. But why does Israel have? This is already proven. This is Hamas uses ambulances to go through its operation. This is something that's very, very obvious. That's proven, that's spoken about before, and yet the international community is like, well, can you prove it? Because Hamas said that they're not using it. Oh, the pathological liars, the mass murderers, they're the ones that are telling you the information, and you're sitting there like a little tatala, be like, yeah, what else? What else can you tell us? And you read this, and the emotions are just all over the place. The emotions are all over the place. And then finally, when you think that, okay, anti-Semitism, finally it's being addressed, and finally people are speaking out about it, Harvard University came out, the president came out, condemning anti-Semitism on campus. You know what the response was to that? 100 professors. Let me repeat that. It wasn't 100 students. It was 100 professors in Harvard University. They came out and they penned a letter condemning the university president for her recent statements of opposing anti-Semitism on campus. What was their reason for condemning it? Because it infringes on freedom of speech. This is the same people that scream and yell, we have to be very careful not to have, to protect people's pronouns and to protect people's, what they identify as. And we have, we can't have any aspect of hate on campus because we have to be all inclusive. This is people that are pushing nonstop on how we have to accept everybody. Oh, but when it comes to murder of Jews, no, that's okay. And you're not going to allow freedom of speech. What happened to freedom of speech when someone doesn't want to, call a man a woman or a woman a man? How do you balance that? Where's the flip flopping that's going on over here? And to add insult to this, the professors, they called on this president of Harvard that what you should do is you should establish an advisory group on Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism. That's what you should do. So anti-Semitism, that you can do, but Islamophobia, that's what we should focus on over here. And there was a history professor by the name of Kristen Weld in Harvard that said that, it seems like the president of Harvard is showing favoritism to one side of the conflict. I'm like, wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Let's back favoritism to one. If you look at all of the colleges, the professors, all these Ivy Leagues that came out, there was a very one obvious favoritism that they were going for, and that was not Israel's side. And you look at how hypocritical can people be? So it makes you, at this point, the emotion is there is no hope. Where can we go at this from here? There's literally no hope. So we have this wide range of emotions. We have this difficulty of coping it, and this is something that anybody that's being involved in the news is dealing with it on a day-to-day basis. They're dealing with all these wide range of emotions, and then they have to go through their day-to-day life with whether it's work, whether it's learning, whether it's raising kids, relationships. There's so many things that this affect. Sometimes it affects it positively, which is awesome. It's amazing. But sometimes it affects it negatively, and we have to realize how are supposed to internalize, this information. So I would like to share with you something. Come with me on a little bit of a parsha journey. Something from Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and this is Rabbi Sachar brings it down based off Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. So when we look at the Avos, Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, we know that they kept, based on the Rishonim, they kept the Torah when they were in Eretz Yisrael, meaning the Torah wasn't given yet, but they kept the laws of the Torah in Eretz Yisrael. The Ramban, Nachmanides, asks a question, wait a minute, Yaakov married two sisters, and we know through the Torah, halachically, you're not allowed to marry two sisters. So the famous answer that the Ramban Nachmanides gives, that this is where we base off the idea that the Avos, they kept the Torah only in Eretz Yisrael. And that's why when Yaakov married two sisters, it was only outside of Eretz Yisrael, but inside of Eretz Yisrael, he wasn't married to two sisters. It comes Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky and he says, you're not explaining this correctly. That's not the correct interpretation of this Ramban. And listen to this fascinating idea of what Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky explains. He says, what the question that came was, how could Yaakov marry two sisters? It's never a question to begin with. The reason for that is because the reason why Yaakov married two sisters is because Yaakov came over to Rachel and he made a commitment to her, and he says, I am going to marry you. Lavan came and switched, and gave Leah before Rachel. And so threw a wrench in it. But the reason, explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, that Yaakov married two sisters because Yaakov gave a commitment that he is going to marry Rachel, and he is going to fulfill that commitment. He gave a word. Oh, but you want to say that the Avos kept the laws of the Torah? That's a chumrah. That's a stringency. That's a optional piety that was done on the Avos part. But if you have a stringency, and then that contradicts my word takes precedence, especially if it's going to affect someone else. So there was no justification to allow Rachel to suffer because of my stringency of keeping the Torah. So explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, the reason why Yaakov married two sisters is because for the latter one, he gave a commitment and he is going to follow through the commitment. So then he goes and explains the Rambam. So what does the Rambam mean? That the Ramban mean that the Avos didn't keep the Torah and Leichotzares. So the Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky explains that when he's really answering a different question. When you have a righteous person, God protects righteous people, especially in spirituality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu makes sure that He will not bring a takala, a misfortune, on the act of the righteous. And he explains as follows: let's say you have a righteous person, a tzaddik, that goes into a restaurant, and he goes into the restaurant, he orders a meal, and later it is found out that this restaurant was serving meat that was not kosher. Kosher or not kosher, it must be that the righteous person that went in to buy a piece of meat from this restaurant, he had one of the kosher meats. Why? Because in heaven they will never allow it that a righteous person will sin like this. That a righteous, you have a tzaddik, they will never allow it that a tzaddik will have tray of food, impure food, not kosher food, go and enter his mouth. So the Ramban is asking like this. This is the Ramban is asking, explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. How did God let this happen to Yaakov? How did God let this happen that Yaakov will be stuck with marrying two sisters if the Torah says that you're not allowed to marry two sisters? Why? Because God would not allow a something bad, something negative, something spiritually negative to happen to a righteous person. Who more righteous than Yaakov Avinu? Yaakov was very righteous. So how is it possible, explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, that God allowed that Yaakov would be forced to marry two people because he gave his word to one? So to this, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, is what the Ramban is answering. The Ramban is answering that where is this a forbidden thing? Where is this an Israel? That's only in Israel, in Eretz Israel. But outside of Israel, this is not forbidden. And hence, when it happened that Yaakov had to marry two sisters, it wasn't forbidden where he was because he wasn't in Israel. And that's how the Ramban answers. But what's the takeaway? What's the takeaway? If you haven't followed me until now, the takeaway is that Yaakov Avinu was extremely honest, and if he gave a word, he's going to follow through with it no matter what. And this is what explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky. And this Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was also extremely truthful in everything that he did. And his farm is actually written Emes Yaakov, the truth of Yaakov. And there's two stories that I brought down that Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky lived into his 90s, lived a ripe old age. And towards the end of his life, he started putting on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. Rabbeinu Tam, most people, they put on Rashi's tefillin. And the difference between Rashi and Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin is just that there are, in the tefillin, there are certain parshios, so certain sections of the Torah that are written, and the difference is that in Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin versus Rashi's tefillin, it's placed in different order. That's a different. So, at the end of his life, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky started putting on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky was a Litvak. He was a Lithuanian Jew. He was born in Lita. He studied in Slobodka Yeshiva. The custom to put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin is not a custom amongst the Ashkenazi Jews. It's more of a custom amongst the Hasidic Jewry. So the question that is asked is, why is it if you have Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky that was a Litvak, he was from he was not Hasidish, why is it that he started at the end of his life putting on Rabbeinu Tam tefillin? And the reason for that is because many years prior to that, you're talking about over 50 years prior to that, prior to when he started putting on tefillin, someone approached him and they said, Rabbi, why aren't you wearing Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin? And Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky responded, he says, what do you mean? I'm a Litvak, and we don't wear Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. So this person responded, yeah, but the Chafetz Chaim was also a Litvak, and at the end of his life, he wore Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. So Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky responded, when I get to the age of the Chafetz Chaim, when he put on tefillin, I'll also put on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. And that's what he said 50 years prior to that. Fast forward 50 years later, he lived to an old age. He came to the age of when the Chafetz Chaim put on the tefillin. So he said, okay, I gave my word 50 years ago. I have to live up to that. And that's why Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky started putting on Rabbeinu Tam's tefillin. Why? Because he kept something that he said 50 years prior. Some people can't keep what they say within the same sentence. This is what a gadol is. This is what a tzaddik is. He knows that if a word means something, you give someone your word, you follow through with it. And there was another story with Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, and that is that he did not eat gebrux. Gebrux is when you have, on Pesach, on Passover, when you have matzah products that came into contact with liquid on Pesach. The Hasidic minhag is that you don't eat gebraks. The Litvish minhag is that you do eat gebraks. But Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who was a Litvak, who was not Hasidic, he did not eat gebraks. And what was the reason for that? His family ate gebraks. He let his family eat gebraks. Why didn't he eat it? And this goes back to when he was learning in yeshiva in Slobodka. And when he was learning in yeshiva in Slobodka, as everybody would be when they were learning in that time, is that there was no dining room. Everybody would go to a particular person's house, and that's where they would eat their meals, either every day or every other day, just to be able to survive and continue learning. So one time he was invited to go to a person's house, and for whatever reason he wasn't satisfied with the level of kashrus that this house had. So it was Pesach, and back then everybody was eating gebraks because that's what there were. And he when he was invited to this family, he said, "I'm sorry, I can't come." And they're like, "Why can't you come?" Now he didn't want to insult them and say, "Well, I don't trust your level of kashrus." So he said, "Oh, I don't eat gebraks, and I know you guys eat gebraks." And they were like, "Oh, okay, yeah, that makes sense. Like we do eat gebraks." So like, okay, no problem. So he was able to go and eat somewhere else. But since he said that he doesn't eat gebraks, for the rest of his life, he did not eat gebraks. That was his level of honesty. That was his level of what he kept to his word. So now when you look, that was Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, who lived in the previous generation. When you look at Yaakov Avinu is known as an ish emes. He kept his word. So then we have to ask a question that we could ask it on previous parsha, last week's parsha, is that when Yaakov went over to his father Yitzchak and he pretended to be Esav, and he says, "Anoichi Esav bechorecha," I am Esav, your firstborn. How could this be? How could this be? You have someone, is a question that many people ask. Many people have a very hard time with this question. Be like, how could it be? How could it be that I am, like you talking about the biggest ish emes, known that the highest level of truthfulness was Yaakov Avinu. How is it possible that he says, I am Esav, your firstborn? So Rashi answers and says, no, the way that you're supposed to read it is Anochi, Esav, he is your firstborn. That's how you go. And some people are satisfied with this answer, some people are not. But Rashi in Makos, in Mesechtes Makos, in page 24, tells us something fascinating, a big chiddush, that what was going on over here? Like, why was Yaakov going and pretending to be Esav? He's an Ish Emes, and he came and he went over to Yitzchak and pretended to get the brachos. So Rashi goes and explains a chiddush, and he says that he did not want to lie to his father. After all, he's an Ish Emes. He's an honest person. He's not going to lie, but his mother forced him. His mother Rivka forced him, and you know what she said? This is not based on me. This is based on what Hakadosh Baruch Hu wants. And she tells him a nevuah. She tells him a prophecy. He says, God wants you to do this. She delivered a prophetic message, and Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky says, could be this is the only way the only reason that Yaakov would do it. Otherwise, who knows if he would have done it? But once he hears that there's a prophet that God said to do this, he has no choice. He has to do it. But the question that we have to ask is that why? Why did God make it? Why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu make it that Yaakov is going to get the blessing through this deceiving faction? He is known as Emes. Why is he supposed to go and get the blessings, even though he deserved it, even though he earned it, even though he bought the Bechara from Esau? From all legal perspective, he deserves it, he earns it, and it goes to him. But why did it have to be in such a deceiving way? Why couldn't it be? God could have created it in a way that's very honest and very straightforward and very, the way that it would be for Yaakov Avinu. So explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky something fascinating. That each of the avos are known to have a particular attribute. They're known to have something that is something that they represent. And for example, so we know that Avram Avinu, he represents chesed, kindness. And then when you look at the tests that God gave Avram Avinu, it looks like, wait a minute, it's the opposite of chesed. The first test, lech lecha, that God tells Avram Avinu, you have to leave your father's house. Which man of chesed, of kindness, would leave his father? Like, why did God give Avram Avinu this test? The test of leaving your father. Avram Avinu is known as chesed begins at home. Why is he leaving his father? And not only that, God gave HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave another test of what? Sending Hagar his wife away. This is a man of kindness. This is a man who loves everyone. This is a man. Why would he go and send his wife Hagar away? And not only that, you talk about the highest level of kindness. He was set to slaughter his own son Yitzchak. He was the one that was preaching to everyone: do not slaughter. God does not want you to slaughter your children to your idols. And he was convincing them. He says, this is not what God wants. God is a loving God, a wanting God, and wants everybody to live. And now the test was, now you're going to sacrifice your son to me. This is not a kindness. So the question says, Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, why is it that Avram Avinu was tested in the things that he was going directly against what he represented, what he worked so hard? His MO was kindness. Why was he tested on the opposite of kindness? So explains Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky something so fascinating, beautiful. He said, you know what God was telling Avram Avinu? The Rabbi Shalom was telling Avram Avinu, says, if you really love me, if you really fear me, that I want you to engage in the activities that is the most difficult for you. You know what's more important to Avram Avinu than being a Baal Chesed? You know what's more important to Avram Avinu from being kindness? That's listening to the word of God. You know what makes it a test? Because it was the most difficult thing for Avram Avinu. That's what gives value to the test. We see the same thing that happened with Yitzchak. In Yitzchak, in Shabbos, chapter 89, 89b. The Gemara says something very interesting. In the future, God is going to go to Avram Avinu, and He's going to tell them, your children sinned against me. So Avram Avinu is going to respond, they sinned against you? Yimachu al kedushas shemecha. Let them be annihilated, let them be destroyed, obliterated for the sanctity of your name. So Hashem says, okay. He goes over to Yaakov Avinu. He says, your children had sinned against me. You know what Yaakov Avinu responded? Yeah. Let them be obliterated for sanctifying your name, for the sanctity of your name. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu is going to go to Yitzchak. Yitzchak is known as Din. Yitzchak is known as justice. And God goes over to Yitzchak and He says, your children have sinned against me. You know what Yitzchak responds? Wait, my children? They're your children too. Huh? You know, when you have, a husband comes home and be like, and the wife goes and be like, you know what your children did? Because that's not going to be something good. Yeah, it's not going to be like, well, you're a child, just like you, so genius. They got 100 on the score, and then they went and they, helped, chesed for who knows how many families. No, if you're coming home and you get the response from your spouse, oh, you know what your children did? That's not going to come out nice. That's not going to come out good. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu goes over to Yitzchak Avinu and he says, you know what you children did? And Yitzchak Avinu stops. Says, wait a minute, they're your children as well. And then HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, your children sinned against me. So Yitzchak starts negotiating. Yitzchak, the man of din, the man of justice, he goes and says, okay, well, what's a human lifespan of a human being? 70 years? Okay. So you have to take away the first 20 because you don't get punished for the first 20 years. And you're left with 50 years. Now you have to take away half of that 50 years because half of that is nights and people are sleeping. They're not able to sin. So you're left with 25 years left. But you have to slash another 12 and a half. Why? Because they're spent in praying and eating or going to the bathroom. So you're left with 12 and a half years of potential sin left. So Yitzchak goes and he says, if you shoulder all the sin, fine. If not, let's split it. Half on me and half on you. I'll take half the sin, you'll take half the sin. But this is a big question. Wait a minute. Who is saying this? This is Yitzchak is saying. Yitzchak is known as justice. It's Pachad Yitzchak, the fearful Yitzchak, who was always afraid of sin and its punishment. The straight and arrow, everything was just for din. How is Yitzchak responding to this? And the answer is, says Rabbi Yaakov Kamenetsky, this was Yitzchak's Hakeda. This was Yitzchak's test. You know why? Because everything that he represented was justice, was straight. You know what the test is? The test is that when it's something that's your MO, it's something that you represent, and now you have to go against it. That is, you're not going to go by the book. I am not going to say that they're going to be accountable. That is the test. That is the test that Avram Avinu had, and that is the test that Yitzchak Avinu will have. And now we look at Yaakov Avinu. Yaakov Avinu, it says in Micha, chapter 7, verse 20, Titen emes leYaakov. Yaakov is known as emes. Yaakov is known as truth. So it went against every grain of Yaakov Avinu's body. Be like, wait a minute, I have to be untruthful to my father? And Rivka, his mother, said yes, because this is what God said. I'm not responding. This is what HaKadosh Baruch Hu said. This is the way that you have to do it. And this was the test. Do I do everything that I've worked on until now? This is my MO. This is everything that I focused on. Or do I go and do I listen to God? And just like Avram with Chesed, and just like Yitzchak with Din, Yaakov had that test with Emes. And that was the test of Yaakov Avinu. And explains the Vilna Gaon in Sefer Yonah that most of us are Gilgulim. We have been to this world before. And we came back to fix something. We came back to do something better. This was not a prize that we're here again in this world. We are here to fix something. What are we supposed to fix? The most difficult thing for you, that's what you need to fix. Just like the most difficult thing was a test for Avram. The most difficult thing was a test for Yitzchak. The most difficult thing was a test for Avram. The most difficult thing for you is a test for you. That is what you are here. That is why you are placed on this world for. Explains Ramah Biderman. The Chafetz Chaim, he quotes the Chafetz Chaim, that when you perform a mitzvah that is with a challenge, it's worth so much more than a mitzvah without a challenge. And this is based off the Mishnah in Avos Rab Nassan, that a single mitzvah that's hard to perform is greater than 100 mitzvahs that are performed without difficulty. Meaning the more difficult something is for you, the greater the value, the greater the worth it is. The Baal Tanya had a grandson by the name of Rabbi Nachum, and he bought a very, very expensive jacket. There was like fur around the collar, and he bought it at the time that he got married. The Baal Tanya, the Lubavitcher Rebbe, did not like the style. It wasn't the way that Jews dressed at the time. So he told his grandson, I don't want you to wear this jacket. His grandson said, I'm sorry, I can't stop wearing it. So the Baal Tanya said, I'll buy you another jacket. So his grandson said, no go. Sorry, I'm sorry, I can't. So the Baal Tanya says, I will give you money. I'll pay you for it. I'll pay you more for it. The grandson said, I'm sorry, I can't part with this coat. So the Baal Tanya said, I'll learn with you. Which, by the way, if we just pause the story right there, we can see the level that his grandson was on. Meaning that you start off negotiating table, you start off low, and you work your way up. Right? So how did it start off? I'll buy you another jacket. No can do. I'll give you money. No can do. If he said, I'm going to now learn with you, that means that is worth more than the money and buying a new jacket. And you know what the grandson said? I'm sorry, I cannot do it. So then the Baal Tanya replied. He says, if you take off the coat, you will be with me in Gan Eden. And that, the grandson said, I'll agree to that. And he accepted the offer, and he took off his coat. And the students of the Baal Tanya, after the grandson left, they went over to the Baal Tanya and says, how could you promise him that? How could you promise it? Like, how do you know? How can you promise him that? And the Baal Tanya responded. He said, because I saw how difficult it was for him to give up that coat. I saw how difficult it was for him to stop wearing it. And I realized that the greater the test, the greater the reward. So yes, if he is able to overcome it, he will sit with me in Gan Eden. And that is something that we have to really internalize. The greater the test that we have, the greater the reward that we will reap from it. And we see something very interesting, that when Rivka, when she was pregnant in last week's parsha, when she passed by the yeshivas, when she passed by the doorways of Torah, what happened? Yaakov struggled to come out. When she passed by places of avodah zarah, places of idolatry, Esav struggled to come out, meaning that they were predisposed to one way or another. Esav was more pushing towards idolatry, and Yaakov was pushing more towards spirituality. Explains the Yismach Moshe, something fascinating, something like a question that you maybe had your whole life and you didn't get an answer until now. Why is it that Yitzchak Avinu wanted to give the blessings to Esav? Like, Yitzchak was not a silly, dumb person. He knew who Esav was. He knew what Esav was. So why is it he should have been like Yaakov is the one that deserves a blessing? Yaakov is the one that represents the spirituality, and that is who I should give the blessing to. Why did Yitzchak even want to give the blessings to Esav to begin with? And the answer is based off what we were just discussing. That Yitzchak Avinu realized that who has greater spiritual potential? Esav, he was pushing to go into idolatry. Yaakov was pushing towards spirituality. Who is going to be valued more when they do something spiritual? The answer is Esav, for sure Esav, because it's more difficult for him. He was predisposed, he was pushing, he was more motivated to do evil. And if he overcomes that and he goes to the spiritual, his value of spirituality is going to be worth much more than Yaakov Avinu. He has greater potential because of his difficulty. And that's why Yitzchak wanted to give the blessings to Esav. But then all of a sudden, when Yaakov Avinu comes, and Yaakov starts saying, like, Anochi b'charecha Esav, I am Esav, your firstborn. Yitzchak what is his response? Hakol kol Yaakov vayadai midei Esav. The voice sounds like Yaakov, but the hand feels like Esav, meaning that Yitzchak knew that this was Yaakov Avinu. But what was the Chiddush? The Chiddush was that, wait a minute, if Yaakov is coming and taking this blessing, that means that he is, there is room for improvement on Yaakov Avinu. The Yaakov Avinu has a reason to deserve these blessings. That when Yaakov Avinu goes and does something spiritual, it's still going to be worth a very high level, because we could see that he's doing it in a deceptive manner. So Yitzchak says, I see now, explains the Yisam Moshe, that Yaakov Avinu has potential just like Esav Avinu has potential. Because beforehand, Yitzchak said, well, Yaakov is perfect, Esav is lacking, so I have to give the brachas for Esav. Yeah, that's going to be worth a lot more. But now he sees that Yaakov is also lacking. Now Yaakov is going to be able to have value those blessings. So we see over here that our deficiencies, our difficulties, our struggles, that's what gives us the edge. That's what gives us the ability to grow. The fact that you have hard time is the greatest blessing that you can ever have. Again, we don't ask for hard times, and we don't want the hard times. But if God gives you a hard time, you know that difficulty, you have the greatest opportunity for growth. Esav had greater opportunity, greater potential than Yaakov Avinu. So when we look at where we're standing today, and we look at all the emotionally charged situations that we're in, this is a test on how are we going to respond. When emotions are high, intellect is low. It is very hard to think intellectually when your emotions are running high. If someone has anger issues, it is very, very difficult to go and say, when you get angry, now work on yourself. When are you supposed to work on yourself? You're supposed to work on yourself before you get angry, and you're preparing yourself for that. Meaning that if you know a test is coming, if you can prepare for the test, you have more of a chance of success. And I would like to share with you a story that I mentioned before, years ago. There was an Israeli soldier, and was a Israeli soldier. He was a genius of a guy. Like, he was at top of his class, and when he was drafted and he got into his particular brigade, he was a top in that also. And he decided he wanted to learn Arabic. He learned it fluently in under a year. He was a genius, and and he aced every single, in the physical aspect, in the intellectual aspect, in the emotional aspect, in all areas he aced it. And the army saw this, and the army noticed him. And he started going very, very high in the ranks. And then he started hearing rumors. There's a certain department, and I'm using air quotes, that doesn't exist. The most elite of elite. The most sophisticated, most advanced, the top of the top of where they use them for missions, that the IDF, the Mossad, the Shin Bet, they use these people for things that, all mission impossibles. They need the top of the top. And this guy was going through the ranks, and he was like, I got to find out about this. And he starts inquiring, and every general that he asks, every person he meets will be like, no, sorry, never heard about it. And he's like, I've heard rumors enough. I know that it exists. And he keeps on telling them, I need to be in this unit. I need to be in this unit. And he keeps on trying to push himself in, but nothing is happening for like 2-3 years. And he's going up higher in ranks in the army. One day he set out on a mission. In the enemy's territory, and he's solo. He's by himself. And he's doing what he needs to do, and then all of a sudden he gets ambushed. It's as if they knew that he was coming, and they quickly, they kidnap him and they bring him into their, the cell underground, into their tunnel, and they start negotiating. They're speaking to him in Arabic, and and they're asking him all these questions, and he's trained for this, so he refuses to answer, and then they start the torture. And they start torturing him. Oh my gosh! They do all the most brutal thing that he ever heard and more. And he's about to crack. He's about to break, and he's about to just give them all the information. And as he's about to break, he's sitting there. He's bruised up. He's bloody. His face is barely able to see out of his eye, and he's sitting slunched over, tied onto a chair. And he looks down. And he notices something. And he notices that the person interrogating him and beating him is wearing an interesting style boots. And he looks a little bit closer, and he realizes these are Israeli army boots. And he starts looking around, and he notices that they're all wearing these types of boots. And all of a sudden it hits him. From all the rumors and all the digging that he has been going through, he heard that this unit that, again, air quotes, doesn't exist. These people, they know all the secrets of the army. They know all the secrets of Israel. They're so connected on so many levels that they have to be sure that if somebody, God forbid, they get kidnapped, they would rather die than give up the secrets of the country. So one of the things that came out is that they kind of, any potential candidate, they torture, they really do unspeakable things to make sure that this is someone that's worthy to be on this unit. And the second that he saw the shoes, and the second that clicked in his mind, he's like, wait a minute, this is a test. And instantly, he became so strong that they started beating him, but he knew that they're beating him, but they're his brothers. They're testing him. The second that he knew it was a test, his whole mindset changed. They started beating him, and he started laughing at them. And he's like, this is all you got? Bring it on. They knew that they weren't going to go over. He knew that they weren't going to go and kill him. So he was the most macho man possible. He was like, this is my opportunity. So they're punching him, and he's like, I will never give up my country. He's like, and I'm like, that, you call that a punch? Like, you should come to the Israeli, I'll show you what a punch is. He's like, come on, give it to me more. Let me see what you really mean. And he's taunting them, and they're beating him, and he's taunting them. And they realize that this guy, he is not breaking. And when finally, after that, they felt that they went enough, all of a sudden the Israeli commanders came in and they said, oh, this is just a test. And he was like, oh, really? Oh, I didn't know, and he says, welcome to this unit that doesn't exist, and soon you're not officially going to legally exist, and so on and so forth. The rest is history. So what is the lesson that we learn from this? The lesson is that things in life are very difficult. Things in life are very hard. Day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. Whether it's our relationships, whether it's our own personality, whether it's our own issues, whether it's our work, whether it's our children, whether it's anything in between, we're in a difficult situation. But you want to know what makes a job easier to handle? You want to know what makes a test easier to handle? When you know it's a test. If you know that, wait a minute, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is testing you because you're about to get a big promotion. And before any promotion, God tests you. So if you realize that this is a test, you start laughing and be like, this? Okay, I got this. No problem. You could take it on with so much easiness, so much without any difficulty. When the difficulty was at like 99%, when you realize this is a test and I could overcome it, all of a sudden that 99, then 1 9, it drops like a 9% difficulty. It drops so much. So we have to realize that on a day-to-day, we're constantly being tested. You read an article and you get angry. This is a test from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a test of emunah. You're feeling frustrated, you're feeling sad, you're feeling confused. This is a test of emunah. How do you respond? Do you realize that God is in control? Or do you think, no, the Israeli army is in control and they're doing something wrong, they shouldn't be doing it. The United States should be doing this. The United Nations is a piece of garbage that's not worth the paper that they write their name on, which is true, by the way, but nonetheless, you get so angry. Doctors Without Borders, what good are they when they support terrorism and they don't mention any human rights violation? What good is the Red Cross when they know all the disasters that's happening in Gaza and they don't mention anything? What good are journalists that are biased and they only care about their own agenda? And you can get frustrated, you could get angry, you could get sad, you could get confused, you can get frustrated, you could get any emotion. But once you look at it from a different angle, you start realizing, wait a minute, this is a test. This is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This is from God. Am I going to get angry? What is going to be my response? And this is not something that you can utilize just for the roller coaster of emotions that we're going through. But you could utilize this in your day-to-day activities, whether it's with your spouse, with your children, with your boss, with your learning, with yourself, with God, with anything in between. When you realize that when you approach a difficulty and when you encounter a difficulty, this is HaKadosh Baruch Hu saying, I am testing you. And if you know it's a test, you'll be like, okay, wait a minute. Then I am just not going to get angry. Like, let me just it's a test. I am not going to get angry. I have the ability to overcome it. I am not going to get frustrated. I have the ability to overcome it. Because it all boils down to one factor, and that is the important understanding that HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls everything. HaKadosh Baruch Hu controls every single thing that happens in your life, macro and micro. Everything from what's happening to Israel to the wrong shirt that you put on that day, to the spill of the coffee, or to the freeing of 300 Palestinian terrorists. Everything is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. So when we look at it, anxiousness, anxiety, depression, sadness, all these things go out the window. Yeah, it's difficult. Yeah, maybe I don't agree. Yeah, I probably know better than the entire Israeli government. Yeah, I probably know better than everyone. But at the end of the day, that's not the correct response. The correct response is like, wait a minute, HaKadosh Baruch Hu is testing me. What am I supposed to do? Oh, yeah, maybe I say Tehillim. Maybe I improve. Maybe I'll learn a little bit more. Maybe I'll dress more modestly. Maybe I'll treat my spouse a little bit better. Maybe I'll treat my children a little bit better. The list goes on, and you each know what you have to work on. We all know what we have to work on. So instead of going and getting frustrated, realizing that it is a test, and this is the difficult part. We don't think like, hey, wait a minute, I'm reading an article, like how is that going to, yeah, no, that's a test. Like that article is written in a certain way that's going to trigger you. How are you going to respond to that? You're going to be frustrated, you're going to be angry, you're not going to be able to fall asleep, you're going to get anxiety, you're going to get anxiousness, or you're going to be like, no, wait a minute, this is from Hashem. This too is a test. And when we start realizing that, we can start controlling the roller coaster of emotions that we've been dealing since with October 7th. And many of us, and most of us, before that and after that. And this is the important lesson, the important takeaway, that the next time that you're presented with a situation, whether it is an emotional, a physical, whatever it is, you have to stop for a second. You have to realize this is a test. And if it's difficult, then you know the value of that test. Then you know the worth of that test. Because Yaakov Avinu, Yitzchak Avinu, they were all tested on the most difficult aspects of it. Because that's where growth begins. When it gets difficult, that's when you grow. So the next time, which again, in the day that we're living, it's going to be within the next few hours, you are going to be tested. Take this lesson, stop, realize that it's a test, and then you would be able to overcome it. We'll say Kapitel Tehillim, as we always do, and then we'll open up to questions. We'll say Kapitel Kuf Lamed, chapter 130, and again, if you're listening to this, say it along. Don't just be like, okay, you got to the Tehillim part, let me stop. Well, if you do stop it from now, at least say one chapter of Tehillim for the Israeli soldiers, for the entire Jewish nation. We can all use an extra Kapitel Tehillim. Shir HaMa'alais. Mimamakim karasicha Adonai. Adonai shema bekoili tiena aznecha kashuv vais lekol tachanunai. Him avoinai stishmar ya Adonai mi yamoid. Ki imcha aslicha leman tivarei. Kivisi Adonai kivso nafshi vilidvarai haichalti. Nafshi la Adonai mi shoymim la baiker shoymim la baiker. Yachal Yisrael el Adonai ki im Adonai achesed v'harbei moifedus v'hu yiftas Yisrael mikol avoinai sav Achenu kol beis Yisrael hanesunim batzara uvashivya ha'oimdim bein bayam uvein bayabasha hamakam yirachem aleim v'yatzia mitzara lirvacha u'ma'afela li'ayra u'mishibud legeula Hashta ba'agala bizman kariv v'namar amen. And may, by the time this next class comes up, may we have all of the hostages freed, and Emir Hashem that the entire Hamas infrastructure, Islamic Jihad, and Hezbollah should be 6 feet under. Okay, we'll open up to questions. Okay, there was something that came up regarding Thanksgiving, that it's not a Christian holiday. You're right; it's not a religious holiday. It's something that Jews are known as Yehudim, which is the shorsh of that is based off thankfulness. Thanksgiving should be every single day for the Jewish people. That's what it should be. Okay. I apologize for the internet breakup. When I saw that, I switched over to a different frequency, so I hope it became better after that. But thank you for bringing that up. At what stage in life does someone know what is the hardest thing for them? Like, what is hard for a person when they are 20 years old isn't the hardest thing for them when they are 50 years old. Excellent question. And the answer is that whatever stage you are in, the hardest thing for you, that is your test for that stage. That is your purpose for that stage. So you're right, at every stage there are different temptations that come. And at that stage, that's what you need to focus on. What could have been difficult for you when you're 20s, when you're 40 or 50, that might not be as difficult for you. So you might have another test. That doesn't mean that your 20-year-old test was not, is not still active, but that just means that maybe something else comes in precedence. Okay, thank you for the kind word. Greater the test, greater the reward, 100%. Is it possible that Yitzchak was going to give the bracha he gave to Yaakov anyway? It was just not going to be called the bracha of the Bechar, and Esav was going to get a different bracha from the beginning. So the Pashup Shot is that the bracha was supposed to go to the Bechar. The real understanding of it is that Esav sold his Bechara to Yaakov, so it was supposed to go to Yaakov in any case, but the idea of what Yitzchak wanted was to give it to Esav because of the potential that he had. Yeah, interesting. My grandfather always used to say, and not my grandfather, this is a comment, you want to know who a person is, look at their shoes. Interesting. Okay. Yes, exactly. Just like every day should be Mother's Day or Father's Day, not just once a year, 100%. Yeah. And that is the conclusion of all the questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us for the live Zoom class. Anybody who does want to join us, you can email me at rabbizichron@torahanytime.com, or you can look at I started putting it on the YouTube page in the comments, not in the comments, I'm sorry, in the description right on top, there's a link that you can join the WhatsApp group, and that's where you post all the information, and you can join from that. Thank you all for coming. Until next time, may you have the most blessed week possible.